All right, welcome back to the next R Club safety training series. This month we're going to talk about fire prevention and fire protection. As always, I'm your host, John Kenny of Cottony Consulting Group, and I always look forward to being here with you each and every month. So, what are we going to talk about? OSHA and fire protection and prevention. So, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, we know as OSHA, requires employers to implement fire protection and prevention programs in the workplace. There is a list of fire and safety work practices addressing many fire hazards found in the roofing workplace, including field operations and shop activities. Contractors should review the elements of the list most applicable to their company's operation and consider including them in your company's health and safety program. Fire protection. Fire is a chemical reaction that requires three elements to be present for the reaction to take place and continue. The three elements are heat or an ignition source. You have to have fuel, and of course, you have to have oxygen. These three elements typically are referred to as the fire triangle. Fire is a result of the reaction between the fuel and oxygen in the air. Ignition sources can include any material, equipment, or operation that limits a spark or flame, including obvious items such as torches, as well as less obvious items such as static electricity or even grinding operations. Equipment or components that radiate heat, such as kettles, catalytic converters, mufflers, are also sources of ignition. Roofing and fire. Every roofing project has all three of the fire triangle elements present in abundance. The key to preventing fires is to keep that heat and ignition sources away from materials, equipment, and structures that could act as the fuel to complete the fire triangle. Fire classifications. So we classify fires in 5 different categories. Class A, which we know is probably the most common, the fire involves ordinary combustibles such as paper, trash, some plastics, wood, and cloth. A good rule of thumb is if it leaves an ash behind, it's a Class A fire. Class B, this is fires that involve flammable gases or liquids such as propane, oils, and gasoline. Class C, these are fires involving energized electrical components. Class D, these fires involve metal. A rule of thumb on this one, if the name of the metal ends in the letters it's classified D fire. Example of the aluminum, magnesium, beryllium, and sodium. All Class D fires rarely occur in the roofing industry, but you have to be aware of them. Class K, fires involving vegetable or animal cooking oils such as fats, common in commercial cooking operation using deep fat fryers. These can be common ignition sources on restaurant roofs. So these are something we need to be cautious about. Fire extinguishers. There are different types of fire extinguishers designed to put out the different classes of fire. Fire extinguisher selection. The wrong extinguisher actually can make the fire emergency worse. Roofing contractors typically purchase dry chemical fire extinguishers because they can extinguish the 3 most major classes we face, A, B, and C. OSHA requires a minimum rated 10-pound fire extinguisher be provided within 50 feet of the point of a job site using more than 5 gallons of flammable combustible liquids, 5-pound flammable gas. You should inspect your fire extinguishers on a regular basis and maintain fully charged. My recommendation is you exceed the minimum and have multiple fire extinguishers on your site. This way you are prepared if there is a problem and you're also OSHA compliant. Fire prevention. Fire prevention requires segregating the 3 elements of the fire triangle. Post and enforce no smoking signs around flammable liquids and gases. You should have a no smoking policy on your roofs at all times. Have fire watches on all work involving torch applied materials of a minimum of 2 hours after the last torch is turned off. You can never be too cautious with a fire watch. Flammable and combustible liquids. Maintain proper storage and handling of flammable and combustible liquids. A safety can is a container that has a self-closing lid, internal pressure relief, and a flame arrestor with a capacity of not more than 5 gallons. So these are not just typical cans you put liquids in. These are specially made. Flammable liquids that are extremely viscous or difficult to pour, like single-ply adhesives, can be left in their original shipping containers. Be careful of static electricity. Dissipate the electrical charge when handling flammable liquid and combustible materials. Use safety cabinets whenever possible. So yes, it is not a fallacy and it is not a rumor that you can have fire start from static electricity. I have seen these on rooftops where glue and other ignition sources came from static electricity and a fire was created. You should be careful with this. Liquid petroleum gas, or we commonly call it LP gas, used widely in the roofing industry to heat your kettles and especially torches now in torch applied roofing. A compressed gas where fairly large quantities can be stored in a relatively small containers. Collects low-lying areas because its vapor density and it's heavier than air. So always remember that this gas will go low and not rise up to the top. Employees should be warned that if they suspect a leak in a cylinder, they must not use fire to attempt to find the hole. Instead, they use soapy water and look for the bubbles. I know this sounds basic, but you cannot imagine how many people have used fire to find leaks. Employees should not attempt to extinguish fires involving LP gas. If an LP gas fire breaks out, employees should evacuate the area immediately and call the fire department. This is a fire that is very dangerous and can explode and expand at very rapid speeds. So you need to be very cautious and have a plan in place. Torch applied roofing materials. Torch applied roofing materials pose a serious fire hazard to roofing contractors and building owners. Roofing contractors must instruct employees that they must do the following. Never torch directly to combustible decks or materials. Never torch to areas that cannot be fully seen. Not use torches near vents or air intakes. Never use a torch to heat a propane tank that begins to frost on the outside. Always have appropriate fire extinguishers within easy reach. Whenever working with torch applied roofing materials, fire watch inspections must be conducted for at least 2 hours after the work has been completed and the last torch has been turned off. Emergency action plan. As a roofing contractor, emergency action plan for the job site must include the following. Emergency escape procedures, equipment operation procedures prior to evacuation, procedures to account for all employees, rescue and medical duties for those employees responsible for such duties, preferred means of reporting emergencies, names and titles of employees with duties under the plan. So important to get this action plan in place because you cannot be OSHA compliant and you cannot properly keep your employees safe if you don't have one of these plans in place prior to the need for one. Employee training. OSHA requires that all employees be trained to use fire extinguishers. Training is required upon employment and at least annually thereafter. It should cover how to determine when a fire is too big to handle, what types of extinguishers to use, and the pass system for early stage firefighting. It also is recommended that live fire training be conducted periodically. All company fire prevention training sessions should be documented and signed. You can contact a lot of times your local fire departments and they will come out and do these fire trainings for a group. Other than that, you can contact other areas that you buy your safety equipment from and they may be able to do that for you. But it's very important to do proper training. Safe work practices, reporting and extinguishing a fire. The fire department and area supervisor will be notified when a fire is spotted. All workers will be alerted and evacuated as needed. The pass method will be used to extinguish the fire by those employees who have been properly trained. The area will be evacuated immediately if the fire is large. Safe work practices, fire protection. Before each project begins, the project manager or your designee that you put in charge will contact the local fire department and determine whether any variations from the company standard fire protection procedures are required. No smoking signs will be posted at all regulated areas. Only approved containers will be used to store flammable or combustible materials. All containers will be bonded together and grounded when transferring flammable or combustible liquids. All work areas will be kept free of debris and other combustible materials. So you have to contact a lot of times your local fire departments or your fire marshals when you go into an area that you're not familiar with, because there could be local regulations that exceed what you're used to setting up in your proper fire protection plan and in compliance with OSHA. Safe work practices of fire protection. All employees will be trained on the use of fire extinguishers initially upon hire and annually thereafter. So you want to set that up as part of your onboarding. Have them trained on this as well as other safety equipment. And then if you do an in-house safety meeting once a year and you make it on fire prevention and how to use a fire extinguisher, you minimally have covered what you need to do. No employee will be permitted to use a fire extinguisher without having been fully trained. Fire extinguishers will be stored at a distance no greater than 10 feet from torch users. Mops will be spun out and placed on non-combustible surfaces at the end of the day and projects involving hot bitumen. I have seen mop fires created from them not being properly spun out and left and hang, and the heat builds up on the inside, and boom, you have a fire. So if you are still doing hot kettle work, this is very important. What are some of the key takeaways of fire prevention and protection? Understanding fire fundamentals. So fire requires three elements: heat, fuel, and oxygen, known as the fire triangle. Roofing projects often have, which most oftenly have, these three elements present, making fire prevention crucial. So what we learn is if you crack the triangle, you can prevent a fire. Fire classifications, you have A, B, C, D, and K, each requiring specific fire methods. For extinguishing, roofing contractors typically deal with Class A, B, and C fires. Fire extinguishers and OSHA requirements. Proper selection and placement of fire extinguishers are vital. Using the wrong type can worsen the fire emergency. OSHA mandates a fire extinguisher must be readily accessible within 50 feet of any flammable materials and operations. Critical fire prevention practices. It is essential to segregate the elements of the fire triangle, enforce no smoking policies, and ensure proper storage of flammable materials. Regular fire watch inspections are necessary to prevent post-operation fires, especially after using torch-applied materials. Safe work practices. Employees must be trained in fire extinguisher use and emergency procedures upon hiring and annually. Proper reporting and extinguishing protocols include the pass method should be followed during fire emergency. Your emergency action plan. You have to have an emergency action plan in place that includes evacuation procedures, employee accountability, and emergency reporting protocols. Torch safety. Torch-applied roofing materials pose a high risk for a fire. Strict guidelines should be followed to avoid ignition near combustible surfaces in hidden areas. You should have specific torch safety training for your employees as well. So that brings us to the end of our OSHA and fire protection and prevention safety video. If you have any questions, please reach out to our club or reach out to me at Cotney Consulting Group. Again, this is John Kenny, and it's always happy to be here, and we'll see you on next month's installment.